"This can't be right," Mariana Welsh muttered, recalibrating the Pathfinder's atmospheric sensors for the third time. The senior survey officer frowned at her displays, tapping the edge of her console with nervous energy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, strands escaping in the zero gravity. Her husband, Captain Donald Welsh, looked up from his navigation charts. "Problem with the equipment, Mari? No, that's just it. The equipment is working perfectly. But these readings..." Mariana shook her head. "We're picking up trace elements consistent with terraforming, artificial atmospheric manipulation on a planetary scale." The small bridge of the survey vessel fell silent. There were only 5 of them on this mission: Mariana, Donald, their synthetic crew member T-4000, 432, nicknamed Chet. After a random name generator had made them laugh, Tom West and his teenage daughter Nadia, they'd been working together for 3 years, checking supposedly uninhabited worlds for any signs of previous civilization. It was usually boring work, but the payoff for a significant discovery would set them all up for life. "Fascinating," Chet said, his metallic frame floating over to Mariana's station. The robot's design was clearly alien in origin, but his mannerisms were endearingly human, a result of years spent with the Welsh family. His optical sensors whirred as they focused on the data. "These are decay patterns. Whatever system created this atmosphere, it was maintained artificially for years before beginning to break down." Nadia pushed away from her father's engineering station, her long braids floating behind her. "That's impossible. This planet isn't in any of our colonization records. We triple-checked everything before setting course." At 17, she was already as skilled an engineer as her father, having grown up helping him maintain survey vessels. "Records can be wrong," Donald said quietly, "especially from the war period." They all knew about the war, of course. 60 years ago, humanity's first contact with alien life had gone catastrophically wrong. The same civilization that had created Chet's original framework had turned hostile, and entire colonies had been lost, though most had been evacuated in time. But this planet wasn't on any list, not the colonial registry, not the evacuation records, not even the casualty reports. "Captain," Tom called out, "you need to see this. Surface scan is picking up something." They clustered around the main viewport as Tom enhanced the image. Nadia gasped. There, visible through gaps in the cloud cover, were regular geometric patterns on the surface, too regular to be natural. "Those are buildings," Mariana whispered. "My God, that's a city." "Multiple cities," Nadia corrected, her fingers flying over her father's console. "I'm picking up at least 3 major population centers, or what used to be population centers." Chet's internal processors hummed as he ran calculations. "Based on the atmospheric decay rates and the level of structural deterioration visible from orbit, I estimate these ruins are approximately 60 years old." "Right during the war," Donald said grimly, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder. Mariana looked up at him. "Don, what's our procedure here? Do we call it in?" The captain was quiet for a moment, considering. The discovery of an unknown lost colony would be worth a fortune in survey bounties. But if they reported it too soon, other teams might try to claim a share of the credit. "We need more data," he decided. "A preliminary survey to document our claim. Tom, Nadia, prep the landing shuttle. Mari, I want a full spectral analysis of that atmosphere. Chet, start cataloging everything we can see from orbit." As they moved to their tasks, Nadia paused at her father's station. "Dad, do you think we'll find out what happened to the people who lived here?" Tom shared a concerned look with the Welshes before answering his daughter. "I don't know, kid, but whatever we find down there, we'll face it together." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as they prepared for landing. Tom and Nadia ran diagnostics on their shuttle, while Chet compiled his orbital observations. Mariana continued analyzing the atmosphere, finding more evidence of the artificial manipulation that had transformed this world. "It's definitely breathable," she reported. "Oxygen levels are lower than Earth standard, but well within safe limits. The terraforming decay is slow but steady. In another century or so, this place will be uninhabitable again. As they made their final preparations, Donald gathered them for a brief meeting. I know we're all excited about this discovery, but remember, this is a war site. We do this by the book. Full environmental suits until we're certain it's safe. No one goes anywhere alone, and everything gets documented. What are the chances of finding survivors? Nadia asked, her voice small. After 60 years, extremely unlikely, Chet answered, his tone gentle. But we might find records, data cores, evidence of what happened here. Mariana was still staring at her atmospheric readings. Don, there's something else. These decay patterns, they're not consistent. Some areas show the expected deterioration, but others, it's like something was maintaining them, at least for a while. How long? Years after whatever happened here, maybe decades. They all digested this information in silence. Finally, Donald spoke. Let's find out what we're dealing with. Prep for landing in 30 minutes. Target that largest population center we spotted. As they strapped into the shuttle, Mariana reached over and squeezed her husband's hand. Through the viewport, Nadia watched as they began their descent toward the mysterious city below, her father's reassuring presence beside her, while Chet's processors hummed quietly as he analyzed every detail of their approach. The Pathfinder's sensors continued to gather data as they descended, painting a picture of a world that had been transformed by human hands and then abandoned. But abandoned by whom? And why had all record of this place been erased? They were about to find out. The landing shuttle cut through the thin atmosphere, buffeted by winds that hadn't been touched by terraforming regulators in decades. Nadia's hands flew over the engineering console, making minute adjustments to their descent. "Nice work, kid," Tom said proudly as she compensated for a particularly rough patch of turbulence. "The atmospheric degradation is fascinating," Chet observed from his monitoring station. "It's as if the planet is caught between its natural state and the artificial environment that was imposed upon it." "Less fascinating, more terrifying," Mariana muttered, checking her environmental suit seals for the third time. "Tom, look at these material readings from those buildings. The architecture, it seems familiar." Donald frowned at his wife's data. Something about the construction style was nagging at the back of his mind, but he couldn't quite place it. "We'll know soon enough. Nadia, take us down in that clearing near the city center." The shuttle touched down with barely a bump. Nadia had inherited her father's touch with machinery. As the engines powered down, an eerie silence fell over the cabin. Through the viewport, they could see the ruins of what had once been a substantial city, stretching out in every direction. "Remember," Donald said as they prepared to disembark, "we stay together. No wandering off. Chet, you take point. Your sensors might pick up any hazards before our suits do." The robot's frame straightened with pride at the responsibility. Despite his alien origins, Chet had become an integral part of their makeshift family over the years. His original military programming had been completely overridden by years of peaceful exploration, though his advanced sensing capabilities remained invaluable. The airlock cycled, and they stepped out onto soil that hadn't felt human footsteps in 6 decades. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows through the empty streets. Buildings rose around them, their surfaces scarred by weapons fire and decades of exposure. "Dad," Nadia said, her voice tight with tension, "these buildings, they're human-made, aren't they?" Tom put a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Sure looks that way, honey," Chet's optical sensors whirred as he scanned their surroundings. "Confirmed. Construction materials and methods are consistent with late 23rd century human colonial architecture. This is most unexpected." Mariana had already pulled out her survey equipment. "Don, these readings, the damage patterns on the buildings, they match the weapons signatures from the war. The same weapons used by," she glanced at Chet apologetically, "by my creators," the robot finished quietly. "Yes, I see the similarities, though I must point out that I am quite different from my original programming." Nobody's questioning that, Chet, Donald assured him. Your family. But this is big. A human colony, attacked during the war, that somehow got erased from every record we have? They made their way down what had once been a main street. Signs in English hung askew from buildings: Joe's Hover Repair, New Helena General Store, Colonial Administration. The evidence of human habitation was undeniable. "Look at this," Nadia called out, pointing to a faded poster still clinging to a wall. Her father moved closer with her, shining his light on the weathered surface. "Welcome to New Helena," Tom read aloud. "The jewel of Novus Prime. Well, that's a name that didn't make it into the history books." "Over here," Mariana called out. She was standing in front of the Colonial Administration building. The doors unlocked. They entered cautiously, Chet leading the way with his sensors at full power. The interior was a tomb of abandoned bureaucracy, desks with personal items still on them, chairs pushed back as if their occupants had just stepped away for a moment. "They left in a hurry," Donald observed, picking up a coffee mug with the remnants of its last drink still inside. Nadia had found a terminal and was trying to power it up. "Everything's dead, not just unpowered dead, like all the circuitry has been changed somehow." "That tracks with the historical records," Chet said. "My creators developed weapons that could alter the fundamental properties of electronic systems. Most human colonies were evacuated before these weapons could be deployed, but not this one," Mariana finished. She was holding a document she'd found in one of the desks. "Dawn, look at this. It's an evacuation order. The date. They only had hours of warning, not nearly enough time to get everyone out." Donald took the paper, reading it carefully. "All civilians report to designated shelters immediately. This is not a drill." How many people were living here? "According to this census data," Tom called from another desk, "just over 50,000. Nadia's face had gone pale behind her faceplate. "What happened to them all?" Before anyone could answer, Chet's sensors picked up something new. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual biological readings from the outskirts of the city. Something is different there. The atmospheric readings we noticed from orbit are strongest in that direction." They all looked at each other, the weight of their discovery settling over them. This wasn't just going to be their ticket to wealth anymore. They had stumbled onto something much bigger, a lost piece of human history, a tragedy that had somehow been erased from all records. "We need to check those readings," Donald decided. "But first we document everything here, every scrap of paper, every sign, every piece of evidence we can find. The people who lived here, they deserve to be remembered." As they spread out through the building, carefully photographing and collecting documents, Nadia stayed close to her father. The empty offices and abandoned personal items told a story she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The sun was setting outside, casting the ruins in deepening shadow. Soon they would need to decide whether to return to the ship or set up camp in the ruins. But for now, they worked in silence, piece by piece, uncovering the story of Novus Prime. They decided to split into two teams to cover more ground, with Chet monitoring both groups through linked sensors. Donald and Mariana would explore the Colonial Defense Force headquarters, while Tom and Nadia deployed drones to map the city outskirts, focusing on those unusual biological readings. "Channel check," Donald's voice crackled over the comm. "Everyone copy?" "Loud and clear, Captain," Tom responded, watching as Nadia launched their first mapping drone. "Chet, you getting good telemetry?" "Affirmative. My sensors are functioning at optimal capacity, though." The robot paused, an unusual hesitation in his synthetic voice. "I must admit to some discomfort processing the weapons signatures. They are uncomfortably familiar to my original programming." Mariana touched Chet's metallic shoulder gently. "You're not that person anymore, Chet. You're family." The robot's optical sensors brightened slightly, his equivalent of a smile. "Thank you, Mariana. Shall we proceed?" The Defense Force headquarters was a fortified structure near the city center. As Donald and Mariana approached, with Chet scanning ahead, the signs of battle became more evident. The walls were scarred with familiar patterns, the same kind of weapons fire they'd seen in historical footage of the war. "Mary, look at this," Donald called out, pointing to a section of wall. "These blast patterns, they're different. Return fire." "They fought back," Mariana realized, examining the evidence. The colony had defenses. Inside the headquarters, they found more signs of resistance: empty weapon racks, tactical displays frozen in time, and a war room with a half-finished battle plan still laid out on the main table. Meanwhile, across the city, Tom and Nadia were getting their first drone footage back. The images painted a picture of systematic destruction. Key infrastructure had been precisely targeted, while residential areas showed more random damage. "Dad," Nadia called out, her voice shaking slightly, "I think I found something. One of the drones picked up an active power signature." Tom hurried to his daughter's station. "That's impossible. Chet, are you seeing this?" "Confirmed," the robot responded over the comm. "A very faint but consistent energy reading. It appears to be coming from what was once a civilian structure, approximately 2 kilometers from your position." "The emergency beacon," Mariana's voice cut in. "We just found records in the command center. They had a hardened emergency beacon designed to work even if everything else failed." "Still working after 60 years?" Donald wondered. "How is that possible?" "The beacons were completely mechanical," Tom explained to his daughter. "Like an old lighthouse. No electronics for the weapons to affect. Just needed someone to start it." He trailed off as the implications sank in. Someone had activated that beacon. Someone had survived the initial attack. "Captain," Chet suddenly interrupted, "I'm detecting additional anomalies. The drone network is showing a pattern to the city's destruction. The attacks were precise, systematic. But there's more. The biological readings we detected, they're centered around what appears to be some sort of sanctuary." In the defense headquarters, Donald and Mariana had found the personnel records. Names, faces, lives documented in military precision. Commander Jackie Milton, Colonial Defense Force. Lieutenant George Jackson, Tactical Operations. Hundreds of officers and enlisted personnel who had tried to defend their home. "Dawn," Mariana called out, her voice tight. "I found the evacuation records. They couldn't get everyone out. The ships they had could only take a fraction of the population. They had to choose." Back at the drone control station, Nadia was analyzing the footage of the sanctuary zone. "Dad, look at this. The plant life there, it's different, more recent, like someone was maintaining it long after everything else died." "Chet," Donald's voice came over the comm, "what's your analysis of the sanctuary zone?" The robot's processors hummed as he compiled the data. "It appears to be an artificial environment, carefully maintained for an extended period after the attack. The design is unusual, organic, almost as if it grew rather than was built. And Captain, I'm detecting signs of recent activity, within the last few decades." "Someone survived," Tom breathed. "Someone stayed here." "Not just survived," Nadia added, her eyes wide as she studied the drone footage. "They built something. Look at these structures, these systems. They're incredible, like nothing I've ever seen." In the command center, Donald and Mariana had found the final transmission logs. The last desperate messages sent before communications went dark. Pleas for help that had somehow been erased from history. "We need to see that sanctuary," Donald decided. "Mari, do you have everything we need from here?" "Almost. Just need to copy the last of these logs." "Don, why would all record of this place be erased? Who would do that?" Before he could answer, Nadia's voice came over the comm, excited and afraid at the same time. "Captain, one of the drones just found something else, some kind of journal. It's protected in a sealed case. And it's signed. It's signed, Marcus Holt, last survivor of Novus Prime." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of their discovery. They had come seeking riches, but they had found something far more valuable and far more terrible. The lost story of a colony erased from history, and the one man who had remained to bear witness. "Everyone regroup at the drone station," Donald ordered. "We need to find this sanctuary. Whatever happened here, whatever Marcus Holt built, we need to see it for ourselves." As the teams converged on the drone station, the sun was setting over New Helena. The emergency beacon continued its steady, mechanical blink, a testament to the endurance of simple machines and the determination of those who had refused to be forgotten. The drone footage hadn't prepared them for the reality of Marcus's sanctuary. What from above had looked like an organic sprawl of structures revealed itself as something far more extraordinary up close. The team stood at its outer edges, staring at the complex network of buildings that seemed to have grown into each other, connected by winding corridors and makeshift greenhouses. This architecture, Nadia breathed, her engineering mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. It's like he just kept building, adding pieces wherever they were needed, but somehow making it all work together. The atmospheric readings are stronger here, Chet reported, his sensors whirring with activity. Whatever systems he created to maintain this environment, some of them are still partially functional. Remarkable engineering, considering the limitations he was working with. Tom studied the nearest structure, his experienced eye noting the innovative use of materials. He used everything he could find. Look at these seals. They're made from melted-down hover vehicle parts. The guy was a genius with mechanical systems. Or desperate, Mariana added softly. She was holding Marcus's journal, found by the drone. Listen to this entry. Day 847, I think. The plants help me keep track of time now. Elizabeth says it's been about 3 years, but I'm not sure I can trust her judgment anymore. She's been moody since the rebellion in Section D. Elizabeth? Donald asked, frowning. One of his plants, Mariana explained, flipping through the journal. Alan, he started giving them names, personalities. There are hundreds of pages of conversations with them. Nadia had wandered closer to the entrance of one of the greenhouse structures, her flashlight beam cutting through years of dust. Dad, come look at this. The way he set up these water recycling systems, it's incredible. They're still working 60 years later. Chet, Donald called out, what's your analysis of the structural integrity? The robot moved forward, his sensors scanning the buildings. The main supports are sound, though some of the outer sections have collapsed. The central chambers appear to be the most stable. And Captain, I'm detecting significant biological activity within. Some of his specimens appear to have survived. They made their way carefully into the first chamber. The air was different here, richer somehow, despite the decay evident all around them. Nadia's flashlight revealed rows of planting beds, some still containing the desiccated remains of what had once been a thriving garden. Here's his workbench, Tom called out, examining a cluttered surface covered in tools and notebooks. Look at these designs. He was developing completely new ways to maintain atmospheric pressure without power, using principles of thermodynamics that I've never seen anything like this. Mariana had found more journals, these ones focused on technical specifications. His early entries are clear, methodical, but later, they start mixing with his delusions. Listen. The Council of Winds has approved the new ventilation system. Elizabeth thinks the dream-catching filters will improve efficiency by 32%. Must remember to perform the ritual of renewal before the next atmospheric cycle. He was losing his mind, Nadia said quietly. But he kept everything running. How is that possible? Perhaps, Chet suggested. His delusions were a form of adaptation, a way to organize and remember complex systems through storytelling and ritual. Donald had been examining a large map on one wall, covered in Marcus's annotations. He divided the sanctuary into nations and provinces, each with its own climate, its own purpose. It's actually a brilliant organizational system, once you understand the logic behind it. Captain, Chet suddenly interrupted, I'm detecting something unusual in the central chamber, a concentration of still-living specimens, and something else, some kind of mechanical system, still active. They made their way deeper into the sanctuary, following Chet's readings. The passages were like a maze, each turn revealing new evidence of Marcus's 60-year labor. Signs marked different territories and kingdoms. Faded murals depicted the history of his imagined plant societies. Finally, they reached what Marcus had called the heart chamber. Here, in a space that somehow managed to feel both sacred and scientific, they found something extraordinary. "Oh my God," Mariana whispered. Before them stood a collection of thriving plants, descendants of Marcus's original specimens, still alive after all these years. In the center of the chamber, a complex mechanical device continued its steady operation, powered by heat differentials and water pressure. "It's a data recorder," Tom realized, examining the device. He built it entirely from mechanical parts. No electronics at all. It's been running this whole time, keeping track of everything that happened here. Nadia had found Marcus's final journal, placed carefully beside the machine. Her hands trembled as she read the last entry. "To whoever finds this place, I am Marcus Holt, the last man on Novus Prime. What I built here isn't just a sanctuary for the life of this world, it's a testament to what we were, what we lost, and what we might have become. The plants have been my only companions, my family, my society. Perhaps I've gone mad, but if madness was the price of preserving something of this world, then I paid it gladly. Let those who find this place understand, even in our darkest hours, life finds a way to continue. We need only give it a chance." The team stood in silence, surrounded by the living legacy of a man who had refused to let his world die completely. After 60 years, Marcus Holt's sanctuary had endured, waiting to tell its story to someone who would listen. They set up a temporary base in what Marcus had called the council chamber, spreading his journals and technical documents across a long wooden table. The room still held an air of faded grandeur. Elaborate murals of plant counselors decorated the walls, their faces rendered with surprising artistry despite the clear signs of madness in their design. "These technical logs are extraordinary," Nadia said, poring over a notebook filled with mechanical drawings. "Look at this water recycling system. He used principles we're still just theorizing about. Dad, some of these innovations, they're beyond anything we have now." Tom nodded, examining the schematics over his daughter's shoulder. Necessity and isolation pushed him to try things no one else would have considered. These solutions, they're brilliant because they had to be. He had no other choice. Chet stood motionless in one corner, his processors whirring as he digitized page after page of documentation. "Captain, I'm detecting a pattern in his writing. The technical entries remained remarkably precise, even as his personal journals became more detached from reality. It's as if his mind split into two distinct tracks, one maintaining his technical expertise, the other creating an elaborate fantasy world." Mariana sat with her husband, reading through the personal journals. Her voice shook as she read aloud. "Elizabeth's granddaughter bloomed today. I named her Hope, though the council objected. They say hope is dangerous, that we should accept our fate, but I see how the younger plants reach for the light, how they find ways to grow even in this dying world. Hope isn't a choice, it's a survival mechanism." Donald squeezed his wife's hand. He was so alone, all those years. "Look at this," Tom called out, holding up a schematic. He designed a completely mechanical computer for logging environmental data. No electronics, nothing that could be affected by the weapons that destroyed everything else. The principles behind it. "Nadia, come see this." The teenager moved to examine the design, her eyes widening. "It's like a massive mechanical calculator, but so much more complex. The way he used water pressure and temperature differentials to store and process data. It's beautiful." "There's more," Mariana said, reading from another journal. "The council has approved the creation of the memory vault. We must preserve everything, not just the plants, but the knowledge of what happened here. Someone must remember, someone must know why New Helena vanished from history." "Did he ever say?" Donald asked. "Did he find out why all record of this place was erased?" Chet's optical sensors flickered, his equivalent of a frown. "I believe I may have found something relevant in the military logs he preserved. It appears the weapon used here was experimental, the first deployment of the technology that could disable electronics at the molecular level. The attack on Novus Prime was meant to be a test, but its effectiveness exceeded all projections. They erased it to hide what they'd done. Tom realized. Both sides, the aliens and humanity, one to hide the weapon's existence, the other to hide their failure to prevent its use. Nadia had found what appeared to be Marcus's final technical log, written in a shaking hand but still precisely detailed. Final system check complete. The sanctuary will continue without me. I've made sure of that. The mechanical regulators will maintain atmospheric pressure in the core chambers for at least another century. The seed vault is secure. The memory vault contains everything I know, everything I've learned. Let it stand as testimony to both human ingenuity and human folly.
When did he die?
Mariana asked softly. Chet's sensors whirred. Based on the degradation of the organic material in what appears to be his living quarters, I estimate he survived for approximately 28 years after the attack. His last journal entry is dated 3 days before his estimated time of death. Donald read the final entry. To whoever finds this place, you may think me mad, and perhaps I am, but know that everything I built here, every innovation, every discovery, came from conversations with my botanical council. Madness? Perhaps. But it was a madness that kept both myself and this sanctuary alive. I go now to join Elizabeth and the others in the Great Garden. May those who find this place understand what we achieved here and why it matters. Marcus Holt, last gardener of Novus Prime. The team sat in silence, surrounded by the documentation of one man's desperate, brilliant struggle to preserve something of his dying world. The weight of their discovery pressed down on them. This wasn't just about scientific achievement or historical record. This was about bearing witness to both the depths of human loneliness and the heights of human resilience. We can't let this be forgotten again, Nadia said suddenly, her young voice firm with conviction. All of this, his innovations, his story, what happened to this colony, it needs to be remembered. Tom put an arm around his daughter's shoulders. It will be. That's why we're here. That's why Marcus built all this, so someday someone would find it and understand. Captain, Chet interrupted, his synthetic voice unusually gentle. I've completed my scan of the memory vault's mechanical data storage. There's so much here. Technical innovations, biological discoveries, historical records, everything he learned during those 28 years of isolation. It's an extraordinary legacy. Donald stood, looking around at the chamber with its faded murals and carefully preserved documents. Then let's honor that legacy. We need to document everything, preserve everything. Marcus Holt's story needs to be told. As they returned to their work, the sanctuary seemed to hold its breath around them, as if the spirit of its creator lingered in the shadows, waiting to see if his life's work would finally be understood. Dawn broke over the ruins of New Helena as the team prepared to enter Marcus's main facility, what he had called in his later journals, the heart of all gardens. They had spent the night reading his records, trying to understand the man whose legacy they were about to witness firsthand. Another section of the roof collapsed, Chet reported, his sensors scanning the structure before them. The central chamber remains intact, but we'll need to be cautious. Many of the support beams have degraded significantly. Nadia was double-checking their equipment, her young face serious with concentration. Even after 60 years, there's still active circulation in some of the mechanical systems he built. How is that possible? Tom studied the data over his daughter's shoulder. Marcus's genius was in simplicity. No electronics, no complex components that could fail. Just pure mechanical engineering, driven by thermal dynamics and water pressure. Basic physics, but applied in ways I've never seen before. We need to document everything, Donald said, checking his recording equipment. Every innovation, every solution he created. This isn't about getting rich anymore. This is about preserving something important. Mariana stood slightly apart from the others, holding Marcus's final personal journal. She had spent hours reading it, trying to understand the man who had lived here alone for so long. He knew he was losing his grip on reality. she said quietly. But he also knew his delusions were keeping him alive, giving him purpose. Listen to this. The council meets daily now, though I know they exist only in my mind. Elizabeth leads the discussions, as she has since the beginning. Is it madness to find comfort in these phantoms? Perhaps. But in a world where I am the last human voice, perhaps madness is its own kind of wisdom. His isolation must have been unimaginable, Chet observed, his synthetic voice carrying an unusual note of empathy. As an artificial being, I understand something of what it means to be unique, alone, but at least I have you, my family. He had no one. They stood before the entrance to the main facility. Vines had grown over the doorway, their pattern too regular to be natural. Marcus had trained them deliberately, creating a living archway. Above the door, carved into the metal with painstaking care, were the words, "The great garden welcomes all who seek knowledge." This was his real legacy, Tom said, examining the intersection of natural growth and mechanical innovation that characterized the entrance. Not just preserving life, but finding new ways for it to thrive, even after everything else was lost. Nadia had been unusually quiet, absorbing everything they'd learned about Marcus. Un didn't just survive here, she said finally. He created something new, something beautiful, even if it came from pain and loneliness. Donald checked their safety lines one last time. The structure's instability meant they needed to be prepared for anything. Remember, we stay together. Chet, you take point with those sensors. Tom, Nadia, we'll need your engineering expertise to understand what we're looking at. Mari, I'll document everything, his wife finished. Every detail, every story. Marcus Holt deserves to be remembered. As they prepared to enter, the morning sun broke through the clouds, sending rays of light through the damaged roof. The beams illuminated the entrance chamber, revealing more of Marcus's murals, intricate depictions of his plant council members, each rendered with a combination of scientific accuracy and fantastic imagination. "Look," Nadia whispered, pointing to one of the images. "That must be Elizabeth." The plant in the mural was painted with particular care, its leaves seeming almost to move in the shifting light. "His first friend here," Mariana said softly. "The one who kept him sane enough to keep working, even as he lost touch with reality." The team stood for a moment in silence, feeling the weight of what they were about to explore. This wasn't just a scientific discovery or a historical site. This was the testament of a man who had faced the ultimate solitude and found a way not just to survive, but to create something meaningful from his isolation. "Ready?" Donald asked, looking at each member of his family, both biological and chosen. They nodded, and together they stepped into Marcus's inner sanctum, where machinery and nature had merged into something entirely new, where madness and genius had danced together for 28 years, creating innovations born from desperation and loneliness. The door closed behind them with a soft sound, like a sigh. Somewhere in the depths of the facility, Marcus's mechanical systems continued their endless work, preserving the legacy of the last man on Novus Prime. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.